Welcome to the Zayari Wellness Podcast, where we learn about other people's journeys. Regardless of age, race, religion, or status, we're all just human and have one thing in common: the ups and downs of life. Join me in welcoming our special guest, Amanda, as we explore the struggles of going through a divorce and being stigmatized in the religious community.
Good evening. I'm Amanda Williams. I'm a Texas National Guard Army chaplain. That is a earful. And today I'm excited to talk about the topic of life after divorce, or just the healing that can that you can have after a divorce. So.
Yeah, and I thank you and appreciate you for coming and making the time. I know you are super busy. You're like a super mom, and you are in the military, which is all its own struggles. And like with all the topics you could have talked about, why this one?
I think that it's a good overcoming topic. I looked at your list of things that you wanted to cover, and I think that sometimes, especially like if you grew up in the church, the thought of divorce is one that initially, when I got divorced, which was about 14 years ago, I thought that it was like a game ender, right? And it can be, but it's really what you choose to do with your life after divorce. And so for me, it's actually been a long healing process, but also a lot of hope, because I wouldn't be where I am today, helping other people walk through different trials and tribulations. And I think it's just part of the toolbox of who I am. And so definitely not a loss to be divorced. And I think that it's just choosing if you want to stay in that moment or if you want to walk through and heal. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you're going to let it define you, or if you're going to, like you said, like add it to your tool of, you know what, like I learned from this, I can pick myself up and I can help other people walk through their journey. Yep. And talking about that, you were there in my journey when I was going through my crazy nonsense. By the way, we served together, for those who don't know, which is probably the majority of our audience. Amanda was not a chaplain at the time. She was going through her journey within the military, and I saw her like almost like a big sister versus like mentor and somebody that I would talk to about things. And so this was something that came up during our times that we talked. So I would like to say that she doesn't just talk the talk. She is walking.
Had to walk the walk. Yeah. I met you as Staff Sergeant Williams, and then Chaplain Candidate Williams, and then we got to go on an adventure together. So I tell people a lot about, I'm like the mental health specialist is a great job. And so I was trying to get a couple people into that MOS, because there's far and few between. And so
they call me the unicorn of the Army. Well, at least in the National Guard, right? We're unicorns.
Yeah. So, and that's definitely, it's like both jobs are jobs that I feel like you have to be called for, jobs where you have to have passion for, because otherwise you can be serving in that capacity, but that doesn't mean you're going to serve well.
That is so true, especially in the field where you're helping people, right? Like people could tell if you really actually like what you do, or if you're just going through the motions. And I feel like you make it worse if you actually don't care about what you do. And so
absolutely. Yeah. You
on
just
the topic,
should not show up.
Facts. Going back to the topic of divorce, like, could you share with the audience, like, what was your journey of marriage like? And being that you said, I like that you mentioned that you were raised like religious, right? And that was a big thing in religious communities, that, hey, if you're like divorced, there's some either inherently wrong with you, you're broken goods, lost good, whatever it is, whether people want to admit it or not, that is still a stigma.
Yes, it absolutely is.
So can you guide us through your journey of marriage? And
so I got married like a lot of military people at, I think 21 is when I
Mhm.
met my husband, and it was like the typical Army story. So I had come home.
What's the Army story? Hold on, the audience
It's
doesn't know.
I'm going to tell the Army story, which is that a lot of people, we get married real quick because we see what we like. And with the military, one of the blessings is that we are not indecisive. We decide what we want and we go for it. And so in the case of marriage, that's exactly like within a week of meeting my now ex-husband, he had said, like, you're the one, I want to marry you. And within 5 months, we were married. And so he seemed to have it all together. And for the season, he was
Mhm.
together until, it's like a lot of things are not exactly the way that they appear to be. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of what happens, or people change. And so there's a
Mhm.
lot of struggles, with mental health on his side, and
Mhm.
just going through Army recruiting, which is a high stress job. And so
Yes.
just didn't end up working out. And it was not
Mhm.
for a lack of, my attempt of trying.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had two beautiful kids. So I have a now 14 and an 18-year-old, which is crazy to even imagine that I have high schoolers now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an amazing thing in the capacity of just having the opportunity to raise beautiful kids. But
Yeah.
yeah, so getting divorced, I guess, I'll go with that. It was not something. I grew up in the Church of Christ, and the blemish was so large, especially as I was trying to hold on to this marriage. And it's like I had went to
Mhm.
church not too long after he told me that he wanted to leave me, and I had a 3-year-old and a 8-month-old, and so
Mhm.
I'm holding this baby, and I have a toddler acting wild. And a church lady turned to me while I was waiting for church lunch and said, your son wouldn't act like that if his dad was around. And it was just
Mhm.
like, you could choose for that to be the story, right? And
Mhm.
I think that one of the things as an Army chaplain that I work a lot with is the opportunity to repair church hurt. Because it's like some
Yeah.
people never go back to church because of that.
Mhm.
Or with divorce, they choose to never love again. And I think that when we
Mhm.
look at divorce, we always have to consider that that was just one person. That was one person that
Mhm.
hurt you. That's not
Mhm.
everybody. It's not a thing of don't love again, right?
Yeah.
Like God will heal you. You do have the opportunity, but you also have to put in the work, So it's like,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
when and what does that look like? It's like everybody, it looks different. For me, I got really back into fitness.
Mhm.
I started accomplishing goals that I wanted to accomplish. So within the first year of getting divorced, I got a house. I started
Mm.
my bachelor's, which is something I had wanted.
Mhm.
I got promoted, both with the Army and with Geico, where I was working full time. And so it's just kind of crazy how it's like sometimes when you're in the midst of something, it can be a hindrance because you're putting in so much effort for something that's not working. And when
Mhm.
that thing goes away or that person goes away, then everything else starts to line up the way that it's supposed to line up. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's so crazy because there's so much to unpack here, right? Like that's
hmm
big picture, right? And I
yeah.
heard three things that I kind of want to touch on.
Okay.
One is marriage in the military, right? Like now that I'm trauma specialized as a therapist, it's very I kind of view that with a different set of eyes because I would like to kind of almost like trauma bonding because you're in an
Yeah.
environment where you are taught to be really hyper vigilant. You are taught that you
hmm
have to keep your head on a swivel. You are taught to be on alert at all times. And when you kind of like look at the outside world, you can't find people that relate to you, your
Yep.
lifestyle, the things that you have either been through or that are going through. And
hmm
so somebody in the same uniform reflects, you know,
Yeah.
we're bonded in a
Points you.
very different
Yeah.
way. I don't think people understand that soldiers
Mm-mm.
are like really bonded in a different way. Like I have to
hmm
look at you and say, I will follow you to the death.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is a different type of bond that you have
hmm
versus being with somebody that are like, oh, I get to know you, I can choose you. And
hmm
you know,
Yeah.
people that are outside have different dynamics going on, of course, but I think it's even
hmm
more heightened in the military. And it's like a joke within the military. Oh, don't get married. But
Yeah.
but let's talk about
hmm
if you love somebody in the military and you do want to make it work, the odds of you guys being stationed together, there's
Yeah.
rotations every so many years. People are almost
Mm-hmm.
forced into this position.
Yeah, because it's like the sooner the better. And then it's also like BAH. And then, if you're wanting to have kids, and in the mindset that I was at like 21 was like kind of, there was a checklist of like, hey, you need to get married, you need to have, and you can't have a baby until you get married. And for some reason at 21, 22, I felt like my clock was ticking, like it's time to go, which it's funny now because I have friends that are, in their late 30s, early
Having
40s,
kids.
and they're just starting the game. And I'm like, well, game's over. Like I'm on the way out. Like,
They're in high school.
yeah, I'm happy for them. It's like everybody has a different, and I think that's something to consider is everybody has a different clock. It's not exactly the same, but like growing up, it was definitely like you are getting married pretty quick out of.
Yeah, I think that's part of the church culture. Because we talk about, let's talk about no sex till marriage, right? Like when you are like forced, like there's no sex till marriage, it's horrible, don't do it. And they don't really explain the why. They don't do really good at educating with the why, but it's just like, don't do it. So then the only way I can have sex is if I'm married, right? That's one. And then not only that, it's also pushing the idea of, your value is almost tied to marriage, because it's like you're not married, you can't serve in like leadership positions sometimes, or depending on the culture of the church that you're in, like you can't preach. And so it's almost like my value is tied to me having a husband, or they even look at men in a different way too. Like, oh, like, if you're not married, I think it's more pushed on women. But then
you
also
can't
like
be an elder of a church without being married biblically. But also as a woman, like biblically, I can't be an elder of a church either. So that's okay. I don't want to be an elder.
Preach, you can't like lead really. And so there's a lot of like stuff to unpack when it comes to like my value as a person. When you're raised in church is they wonder why, they get out of the parents' house, marry right away, have kids, and then you're like, oh my gosh, like who did I marry? Like they didn't teach you what to look for. What are the red flags? You're just enamored by, okay, I need to get married, I need to have kids. That's what's drilled into my head because I want to have sex. I'm in my 20s or I'm my teenagers.
Well, and they have a check, like you have a checklist of like, what does a good husband look like? And for me, in that checklist, it wasn't like a good, equally yoked faith base, right? And so it's like, now I think about what would I look like? What am I looking for now versus what was I looking for then? And even what was I looking for like 5 years ago, And so it's like, it changes, and hopefully, whoever you do choose, you are equally yoked and you do choose the proper values that match your values or your beliefs.
I want to touch on equally yoked too, right? Because I think that is a topic that people think that, oh, they have to be my religion or they have to be a certain way. And I found that when you look at what that truly means and you do word studies on that type of stuff, it means, are we both running at the same pace? Do we have the same idea of what things should look like? Can we work together as a unit to achieve things? So not just, oh, do you believe in what I believe in? Right. Fundamentally, it's can we manage a household together? Can we run finances? Do we have the same ideas? Like, do you have the same view of credit score? Or am I trying to get with somebody and build you up and you're going to hold me back, or vice versa? Like it goes beyond just what is taught of, well, they need to believe the same things you believe.
Yes. Well, and it's like, just because like say, okay, I have a faith base, like I'll ask people just to see where they're at, right? Oh yeah, I have a relationship with God. Okay, well, what does that consist of? Or with the credit score or anything else, it's like, because for me, where I'm at, as you mentioned earlier, like I'm a pretty busy person. So I'm not going to settle down with somebody who is complacent, because I'm not interested in complacency. Like you need to continue to grow, learn, continue to strive all your life. Where I meet people in their 30s, or like this weekend, I had soldiers that are early 30s telling me, oh, I'm so old, and I'm like, oh, honey, like this was an ACFT. So I was sitting there outrunning them. They're telling me they're old and, they're dumb. And and they're about to retire. And I'm like, honey, your life has just begun. Like, what
Yeah.
are you doing? And so I
Hmm.
think that if you are comfortable with someone who just wants to stay home all weekend, then that is great
Hmm.
for you if you're a homebody and that's what you want to do. But like, I have places to go and things that I wanted to do, and it would be cool to have somebody
Yeah.
along for that ride. But if not, that's okay too, because I've
Hmm.
gotten to like a very comfortable, peaceful place where it's just like I will wait because
Yeah.
I'd rather have the right one than one that I can check half the boxes and
Hmm.
I can't, that's like going to hold down the calling, because that's something for me at this point is, are you going to support what I'm doing for the kingdom, or are you going to dim my flame? And if you
Hmm.
are somebody who doesn't have a lot in your toolbox, or you're somebody who is just just a mess, unfortunately that's going to dim my flame, because
Yeah.
I'm going to be putting a bunch of work. And whoever it is, relationship wise, we always have to put in work. I don't know anybody, and this is what I talk to a lot of soldiers about, is I don't know anyone who's perfect unless it's Jesus himself. And so unless you're
Hmm.
Jesus, you're not going to find a perfect partner.
Yeah.
You just have to find somebody that you guys can, one, work together, communicate well, and premarital counseling is something that if someone was to go back and go, okay, what would you have done different? I think premarital counseling is one of the most important items, because there's so many different software programs or so many different ways you can do it. But it really breaks down, like, what do you believe? What does this
Yep.
person believe? Do they want to have children? Do they not want to have children? Do
Correct.
they like to travel? Do they not like to travel? All of the things that are hot
Yep.
topic items, especially in that first year. And so if you
Hmm.
can address them before you get married, then you can work through it, communicate properly, and decide if this is actually like the business decision that you want to
Hmm.
make. Because that's the
Yeah.
other part, is it's a business
Yes.
decision.
I love that you gave that as a reference because it really is. Like, who
Hmm.
am I? Think about you're commingling finances, decisions, in your case, children. Like, how are we
Hmm.
interacting with my children? Like, what's your
Hmm.
role? And I
Yep.
think because everybody has such a different view on life, their upbringing, like what their standards have been growing up,
Hmm.
even in with their experiences and their
Yep.
pain. And I would challenge to say that it's almost more difficult when people that are older are dating, because it's like, I
Hmm.
know we all have baggage and you've lived longer,
Hmm.
which means that if you were not intentional about
Hmm.
taking care of your baggage or your healing,
Hmm.
that
Yep.
I'm going to carry that burden with you. That's
Yeah.
the reality. Like you said,
Hmm.
nobody's perfect, but
Yeah.
it means that we are both carrying each other's junk.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
being like, I myself have been divorced and remarried, and I tell people, if there wasn't abuse in my first marriage, I would have made it work. I would have
Yeah.
tried to make it work, and I actually
Hmm.
did. And he didn't want to. It was his choice, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I had to learn, like from your experience, that you're like, oh, like they told you that, you know, um, that you were scared about, leaving him or whatever
Hmm.
stigma comes along with that. I had that fear. I'm a pastor's
Hmm.
kid, so I
Hmm.
felt like it was like
I
even
forgot
more
you're a
so
pastor's kid. Yeah. Yeah.
highlighted. Like, oh, and I was always labeled in my family as like that rebel child or the crazy,
Hmm.
like, and
Yeah.
it's because like I was very independent. Like,
Hmm.
middle children are very independent, and things that happen as you grow up. But somebody, my husband now, and there's a reason I'm
Hmm.
mentioning is that he had to deal with like my healing process. Like,
Hmm.
there is
Yeah.
nothing. One thing that I remember from my walk of healing from divorce to remarriage is I found out I healed so much being single, and I was so comfortable being single that I did
Hmm.
not care to marry
Yep.
again. And then my
Hmm.
husband came in the picture, and
Hmm.
then I really felt tested. And it's like, now you will know healing on a deeper level. Because now you have
Yes.
someone who
Uh-huh.
resembled what you went through and
Hmm.
then triggers you, right? And
Yep.
then you have to work on that.
Hmm.
And he had to carry that as well as I was
Hmm.
working on my junk,
Yep.
And same for him. He had a lot of relationships that were kind of like
Hmm.
in some different areas that I had to be patient with him. And so, like you said, there is no perfect person, but it's
Hmm.
deciding,
Yeah.
can you work through things
Or
together?
will you work through
How?
them?
Correct.
Yeah.
Like, how do you act when you're mad?
Hmm.
How do you treat me when I tell you no, when I draw a
Hmm.
boundary?
Yeah. Yeah.
those are the tough conversations that will make a marriage last versus all the other stuff, really. Like,
Well, yeah, and it takes two people. I think that we're in such a like dating society where people wait so long because there's like definitely like a midpoint. You know, you don't want to get married in 5 minutes, but you also don't
mhm.
want to date for. I'll meet
Yes.
people that like they date for 10 years or they do the whole I'm going to live together for this amount of years and then I'm going to date. And
Right.
uh,
I'm like, mm-mm, not for
unfortunately,
me.
percentage wise, I think the specific percentage is like 85% end in divorce if you live together first. And so my old fashioned self is never going to live with anybody that I'm not going to be married to, just
Mhm.
because it makes it so that you still have one foot in and one foot out. You know, it's like you're not
Yes.
100% committed. And that's
Mhm.
the same way that a lot of people are treating marriage now is they're like, well,
Yes.
you know, it's so quick. Like I met a kid the other day and he was like, well, we just married. It didn't work. We had too many arguments. So we got a divorce. So it was like a year long, right? And it's
Mhm.
like, that's such a short amount of time. And they're like, maybe we'll get married again later.
That's not how that works.
It's like, well, I mean, you
Well, you
could. I've
can.
met plenty of people that have did, you know, they've done that, but
Yeah.
the success rate of remarrying the same person, I don't know what that rate is, but I know it's not high, you know,
Yeah.
because it's like you didn't fix whatever caused it the first time and now you're doing it again. And you're
Exactly.
bringing all the baggage that belongs to the person that you remarried. It's not
Or in
even,
the between time.
yes,
Because then it's just
yes,
like, who are you with? Da da da.
yes,
Like it's the whole
yes, yes.
you know, and I would also like to shed light on the fact that like when you remarry as someone who's been
Mhm.
married twice, right?
Yeah,
Like I feel like the majority of people that I've talked to, they're like they go back and they're like, you know what? Like it's the same poop. It just smells differently.
yeah,
And
yeah.
you just have to learn. Like
Hmm.
honestly, if you are not a person that you can reflect
Hmm.
on where you lack,
Hmm.
and you can't be told like I don't like the way you're treating me, and
Yeah.
you don't have any business being married or in a
Hmm.
relationship for that matter,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people want to be in the relationship because of the gratification and the
Hmm.
satisfaction they receive,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
But when it really comes to true lasting relationships, if you don't know how to forgive, if you
Yeah.
don't know how to reflect, if you don't know how to accept someone where they are versus where you want them to be, right? Like, and work with them as they grow, as you grow too,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
have no business being in a
Yeah.
relationship or in a marriage because it's not going to
Hmm.
work. So it's the
Well, and if you
character.
aren't willing to do the work to make
Correct.
yourself better, like even after the divorce, right? Because it's like some people continue to repeat the same pattern. And so that time between being divorced and then getting remarried, that's a great healing time. And you shouldn't just rush into another relationship. There's so
Hmm.
many that go from like one, whether it's like I date, or,
Hmm.
you know, I marry and they don't take the time to figure out like, hey, I have these certain patterns or these certain type of people that I choose and why do I choose it. And so I think that that's a super important part is the reflection. Like
Absolutely.
I found myself, I was reading a book about empathy and narcissists, right? And so I
Hmm.
was thinking about why, because this was right as before I deployed, I was like, why am I doing this, right? Because as a person that has a lot of empathy, I attract a
Of
lot of
course.
people who are narcissists because I'm like, oh, I could just. And so I made a rule a while back that I'm like, okay, if I am talking to somebody because they need a lot of work, like counseling wise, right? They're like on the X list. Never
Yes.
ever can
Yes.
we date if I had a bunch of counseling sessions with you. Not
Hmm.
that that's something I'm going to do, but you know, it's like in that mindset, whether it's a friend that I have that's struggling a lot, it's like that's not going to be somebody that would be a potential partner for me.
You're not their
Yeah.
therapist. And
No.
even and I think that's where people kind of like get things mixed up. Is like I'm
Hmm.
here to support you, but I
Yep.
cannot carry your burden for you. Like
Yes.
you have to carry your own burden. And
Hmm.
you have that I talk about when I release my courses and my apps, like there's a healthy relationships module, and there's
Yep.
teaching you the difference between a me problem, a you problem,
Hmm.
and a us
Yeah.
problem,
Hmm.
right? Because even with my husband, when he's struggled, and I'm a therapist, and he
Hmm.
struggled with some things, and we talk about stuff and I'm like, hey, like this is too personal for me. Like I
Yeah.
cannot help you with this. I am not your therapist. And I don't want you to look for me for guidance in that way because I feel like it'll be tainted advice, right? Because you're directly impacting
Because
me.
you're
Like,
biased. Yeah.
yeah, like I'm biased. You're impacting me. I'm gonna
Yeah.
myself is gonna be like, look, let me tell you what I think, right? Versus
But
what's
it's
good
got
for
your
you.
best interest in your advice when you're providing it
Exactly.
in that like close relationship.
Yeah,
Yes.
and even therapists will tell you that when you go to couples therapy, like we have
Mm-hmm.
gone to couples therapy, and for an issue that we had, and my husband said something along the lines like, "Well, I can just talk to her about it," and the therapist told him the same thing was absolutely
Mm-hmm.
not.
Yeah.
That's not appropriate. It's going to hurt your relationship because what
Mm-hmm.
people don't realize is when you are constantly in the position of giving advice to your partner,
Mm-hmm.
you're
Yep.
putting yourself in a power authority over them. And
Mm-hmm.
over time, it becomes like a parent child role where they
Yeah.
look to you as to what they need
Mm-hmm.
to do. You
Yeah.
lose respect,
Yeah.
and they look to you for that and then resent you later on because it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh,
Yeah.
well, you did, and that's not equal yoking. That's not
Yeah.
a
Mm-mm.
balanced
Yeah,
relationship.
there has to be like a give and take. And
Yeah.
that's like something to be very careful because there's usually, even with the military, right, is like you have the doers and the do notters. And so you have the people who are like, hey, like I do all of these things. I'm like in charge of PT, I'm in charge of drug tests, I'm in charge of all this. And this
Yep.
other guy will go and he'll just be like, and I sit here. And so
Right.
you don't want your marriage to be that. And so if you are like the doer type person, that's where you have to be super careful, like almost like mentally slap your hand of like, nope, let them do it.
That was
Even if
me.
it's yeah, it's the same. Like you mentioned like the parent child. It's the same with your kids. It's like I
Hmm.
was talking to somebody earlier, and they're talking about how you have to let your kid fall, right?
Yes.
Because it's like we're so, whether it's your spouse or your kid, you're like, no, don't fall, I'll catch you.
Hmm.
And sometimes, well, one, they're never going to learn the lesson, and two, you're going to continue to enable poor behavior because you're there picking up whatever pieces that fell apart and putting it back together. And so
Hmm.
they can't ever learn how to do things right. And
Yeah.
it's not their fault as much. It's like it's your fault too. Like this
Right.
is your fault because
Yes.
you're like, it's okay, I'll put you
Yes.
back together, let's
Yes.
go. So it's like,
Yeah. Okay.
no,
So
like,
a lot of people have a hard time accepting that,
yeah.
because like it's like whether you're the one being abused or whether you're the one that's abusing the power dynamics or
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Hmm.
People tend to feel more bad for the person that's victimized, but it's
Hmm.
like, do you understand? And they have actually, the people that are victimized have a harder time understanding what their role has been.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean
Hmm.
what my role has been? I have been hurt.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But but you failed to hold them responsible, right? You
Hmm.
failed to
Yeah.
place the
Yeah.
boundaries that you needed to
Yeah. It's the
protect yourself in the
boundaries. Yep.
relationship. Like it goes both ways, and it's hard to place
Hmm.
boundaries when you're a people pleaser and empathizer.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, can't tell
Oh
you how many
yeah.
times my therapist was like, "Put your boundaries down."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it's like having, like, there's almost like, 'cause I tried counseling while I was doing my master's of divinity. And by the time I'd go to see her, I'd already fixed the problem. Whatever it was, I'd be like, okay, so I'm like, this was the problem. And then I did this. And so it's like, as I walk through life, there's like a virtual counselor inside of me, not saying, hey, I never need counseling or anything, but at the same time, I can see the thing and then I can almost like walk myself out of it and go, okay, this is what I would tell a soldier. So what are you doing? And
Hmm.
so just kind of having to like step back, look at what you're doing, especially boundaries, because yeah, people pleasers or people who have empathy, we just want to make you
Happy.
we want to make you happy.
I
We
want
want
to
to
hurt your
make things
feelings.
better. Like I can see how to fix it. Like let me just fix it. And
Yeah.
so that's been something that, especially with the chaplaincy role, I have to be super careful because a lot of people don't want to be fixed. You just need to
Hmm.
let them talk. It's
Yeah.
like let them do what they're going to do and get them to get to their own conclusions, and then there will be some buy-in. And it's the same with coaching people. It's like in
Hmm.
a management role. I can sit here and tell you, like, I work for Geico, so I do auto damage estimates. And so I can tell you how to write your estimate, but then you're never going to learn. So I have to sit there and go, well, so is there something you think you're missing? And wait
Yeah.
until they draw their own conclusion. So whatever it is, whether it's marriage, kids, coaching people, it's teaching them how to use their toolbox instead of always
Yeah.
providing the tools for them.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. And I think, like you said, it applies everywhere. So,
Mm-hmm.
back to divorce when it happened,
Yep.
I want to kind of like talk about what that experience was like. Cause I remember that for me, like I was
Yeah.
devastated when it came to like the reality of my marriage is over, even before you sign the paperwork.
Yeah, the storm that you're going into, knowing that
Yes.
you're about to, yeah. So I would
Looking
say that,
over and the bed is empty and somebody is
yeah,
there.
for me, it was like I could feel that we were headed in that direction pretty much as soon as we got married.
Mm,
Unfortunately, and then when I knew for sure, we had just moved from California to Texas. I'm once again, I've got an 8-month-old and a 3-year-old, and I
mhm,
was working in Austin and driving from Austin to Killeen every day with these babies. And so I was
wow.
gone for 12 hours a day. I'd come home and it was just like, I'm doing all of the work. And then he
Mhm,
had started going out, like, so he's going out, not
mhm,
coming home, and just, writings on the wall. But I was just super devastated because I didn't think that I was going to be successful. I didn't think that I'd be able to pay the bills. I didn't know how I was going to take care of these kids. I just
mhm,
had so many unknowns. And
mhm.
um, like, and then in the midst of that, I'm trying to reclass for a job for the Army. And so
Yeah,
it was
that's a
like,
lot of stress.
yeah. So the day that we had went on our last date was like when God kind of was like, okay, this is fine, right? It's going to be fine either way. So we're driving and he's like, well, this month away that you're going to have is a great trial to see if this is going to work or not. Like,
Mm,
the separation. And
mhm,
God had just like put it on my heart. And now he does it all the time. But in that moment, I
mhm,
hadn't really felt the Holy Spirit move in that way. And he was like, it's going to be fine, And so
mhm,
it's like I came home and, yep, that was it. We were done. And so he left, I think like 24 hours after I got home from 42 Alpha School, and I was just trying to figure it out. I had got a nanny in Killeen so that I could have somebody to watch the kids, and I continued to do this drive back
mhm,
and forth from Austin to Killeen, and I was so exhausted. And I did that, I think it was like 4 or 5 months that I did that drive before God had put it in my heart again. He's like, okay, now it's time to move to Austin. And so
mhm,
it was New Year's weekend, and I had started a little bit of pre-work, but normally I'm like a planner. Everything has to be exactly where it's supposed to be.
yeah,
Well, he had left the house and it wasn't in my name. It was a rental. And I
mhm,
went ahead and just packed. I got some U-Haul and some Craigslist movers, and I packed all the things that I thought would be useful because I was moving to like a 2-bedroom from like a 3-bedroom house, right? So, and
mhm.
it was on the 3rd floor. So I'm trying to
Oh,
figure out how am I going to drag these things up. So took
yeah.
minimal things. I had put in an application for this apartment, but I didn't know if I was going to get it or not. But I parked
Mhm,
the U-Haul in front of the apartment in faith
mhm,
and got a Priceline $50 hotel. And I
mhm,
didn't know if I had childcare or not because I put the application in, but once again hadn't tried it out yet.
mhm.
So I did that all in a weekend, and on
Wow.
Monday, the application for the apartment went through. The childcare was fine, and I found some more Craigslist movers to move the stuff in. So from
Go Craigslist.
Friday, I started in Killeen, and by Monday, I had a new life in Austin. And
Wow.
it was just like I felt like that was a freeing moment because I had done all the work of trying to make it work. Like we had
Mhm,
done marriage counseling, I had begged for him to stay. I had done all the
mhm,
things. So now I'm like, all right, you want to go? Fine. Like here's where I'm going to start. And so as soon as the divorce was finalized, it's kind of went from like nothing's going to work to now all of a sudden I'm buying a house because the house
right.
lined up just like that. Like where it was just
Wow.
like, okay, now you have a house. And the
Mhm,
house was bigger than anything that I could have imagined just for where I was at capacity wise. And so it was just like
wow.
God continued to show me that it was going to work, and that the things that I was afraid of were not meant to be afraid of, because, it's like he doesn't like divorce. There's nothing about it where God's like, yes, please divorce. But at the same time, it's another thing that he forgives, right? It's if he can forgive murder and he can forgive all these other things, then divorce is a forgivable action. He does want you to put in the effort. He doesn't want you to just quit. But at the same time, you have to have two people putting in effort for it to be a successful experience. So,
that's so interesting that you say that, like, because, my journey was quite different from yours in that, like, ours happened really quickly where you just up and left. I had a feeling though, like you said, God be talking. I had a feeling. I had people are going to make fun of this, but I'm Latin. So people be like, I had a dream. That was me.
Yeah.
I had a dream. It happened. And so, in my experience, I remember crying because I identified my divorce as a failure. Like I really took it in my identity that like, I am a failure because my divorce is failing, my marriage is failing.
Yeah.
And I remember that I was just like, God, like, how can this happen? Like, I'm a pastor's kid. I served you my whole life. I don't understand. I was so mad, right? And given I met this guy at Bible school, y'all, not in the military. And so I'd like to
You're
say,
like, he should be the one. He's from the Lord.
All the things, right? But again, they don't teach you the things and the red flags and you know what I'm saying? Like to look for. And so I was so enamored by like, oh, I met this guy at this Bible school, and when everything was happening, I was like, I am a failure. And I tried. When I tell you, like, I lost all respect for myself and I was begging and crying, and we talk about attachment styles, but that's a whole different story. And how, like, if you've grown up a certain way and you have learned to deal with certain behaviors, that becomes normalized and okay. Right. And so I cannot forget the day that I remember God showing me and telling me, if I do not force people to do things, if I respect the human will, what makes you think that you can love someone into changing?
Yeah.
What makes you think that you can force someone or sway someone? You're not respecting their decision and their no, right? And then I had to like really come to grips with that. And that hurt because I was thinking like, no, I'm going to do everything I can in the marriage work, given that I went through abuse. Not just with him, but with his family, the way that they treated me, I went through like physical abuse with him, and to the point where a lot of my family barely knew, maybe will now know him further in depth, but like, it's not something that you talk about because let's talk about honoring your husband. In my head, that looked like I need to make sure everything looks good. So in a way, things that we're taught in church, and I'm not saying they're wrong. Like, I'm not saying you shouldn't honor your husband, but it should be taught, except if they're laying hands on you, and you should speak out and tell someone. You know what I'm saying?
Well, so when you read about honoring your husband, it also says that how Christ honored the church. So there's a triangle of honor, and servant. And so it's like whenever you do officiate a marriage, that's always the verse that we use, but there's also a conversation that needs to be had. And that's something like, if I marry anyone, officiate any weddings, that's a conversation I have, is like, look, this person is honoring you and you're honoring God. And so then there's a triangle of respect and honor and obedience in that capacity. It's just sometimes, unfortunately, when you hear it in a church setting, it's like, and this is how I grew up, or the way that I received it anyway, was that I was supposed to basically bow down and serve him. And so I spent all that time trying to serve him. And I was like, well, I'm going to serve him because that's how I serve God. And that's true in a way, but that doesn't mean that they don't need to respect you as well.
Are you a chaplain saying that?
That's where
I should bow down and be a subservient to my husband like all the time? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying it's kind of where I've been walking lately with God. It's like there's a blessing and obedience. And it's the same with the obedience of a relationship, and that means that both sides will bow down to one another and respect each other. And that's not like when I say bow down or obedience, it's not a punishment, it's respect on both sides.
That's the word key. You know what? When I did a word study on the word honor, like actually like this week,
okay,
and it was like the highest form of respect. It means wisdom.
Yeah.
It means, a person that has honor understands when it's appropriate. And it also says in the Greek and Hebrew, like when it's okay to break the rules.
Yes.
Honor also, wisdom understands when it's okay to not bend a rule, but break a rule when it's not appropriate. So when somebody's telling you, you need to submit to this man at all costs, submission is not agreement with your incompetence.
No.
Submission is not agreement with your abuse. Submission means I honor you as you honor me. Because not only does it say honor your husband, it says treat your wife like a delicate flower. It doesn't just say honor your parents. It says do not chasten your children into rebellion.
Yes.
People don't want to read both sides. I'm like, people think it's Untitled. No, there's two sides.
They definitely do not read. And it's like, the other part is it's like not taking it out of context, right? Because that's why I always think of it as the perfect triangle, right? Because you have Christ, you have the husband, and then you have the wife. And then it goes, and that's where you're at of that honor. And that's where the obedience aspect is as well. And I think as a society, we're like, I do what I want. Yeah. Obedience is a garbage rule. And it's like, no, there's a blessing in obedience. It goes with faith, and so you can't, you just can't walk without either of those things.
Yeah.
And that's where the whole covenant is too. It's like the word covenant means it's more serious than a promise, because you're covenanting with Christ and the person. And that's where we kind of are like, I don't really want to, no, like that's cool and everything, but I'd prefer not, So.
Yeah, it's really sacrificial. I think people love the idea of a relationship because of the benefits of the love or the infatuation. I have found, and I think me and my husband are coming up on 6 years being together. And I know, right?
I remember when you made the Facebook post of like, I'm ready to get married or something in regards to that.
We're not going to talk about how I met my husband.
I just remember sitting there in the
We'll talk about it. Yes. Okay. So the post was, I was single for a little bit, and, I was just like, you know what? Fine. I'm going to date, whatever. And I made a post that, now opening applications for dating must have a beard, doesn't have to be black, because for people that know me, I like chocolate, my husband isn't chocolate, y'all. And so I made the exception, and I said, if you heart this post, I'm gonna shoot my shot. Now, given that we were raised in the church, you don't go and put yourself out there for no man. Okay. You get chased. I talked to my brothers. I have like 1 million brothers. And I was like, hey, do you guys think it's bad if I like shoot my shot with a guy? They were like, well, it depends how you do it. You can't say I'm thirsty, but it's just like, how do we know you like us if you don't tell us? And I said, all right, fine. So all I did was send the basketball, hey, emoji, in his thing, because I thought he was cute. And then it went from there. Okay. Anyways, our story is kind of funny. And it's not the most.
No, I just remember because I think you were at drill when you posted that post. That's why I was like,
let's not talk about my drill shenanigans.
No, that's it. And then after that, I was like, well, dang, it worked out. Look at this. Boom.
I know.
Done. God's like, I'll line it up Facebook style. Because God will line up whatever, right? It's
it's just too funny because the reason I find my husband to be the most funniest story in my life is because, one, in our wedding vows, he's pouring out his heart to me, and he's like, I'm gonna be your shield, and all this cute stuff. And I started my wedding vows everybody here knows you're not my type, ha 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 ha, because I'm a jokester. That's just what I do.
Yeah.
And he started laughing because he knew what I meant. And so, in a relationship, I think what draws us to relationships, it's everybody at the end of the day wants to be seen and wants to be loved. You
Yep.
know, everybody wants to be deeply, intimately. You're born into connection. When you are,
Yes.
when you're born, you're literally connected to your mom, literally physically
Mm-hmm.
connected to your mom. You know, and as you grow, sometimes that connection falters, but at the human
Mm-hmm.
essence, we want connection. We want to be seen, right?
Yes.
And then the hard part comes is I also have to see you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People
It's a
want to be
two-way street.
seen, but have a
Mm-hmm.
hard time seeing somebody else. People want to be forgiven for their mistakes and have a hard time forgiving somebody else. People
Mm-hmm.
want to say, accept me where I'm at and forgive me for my flaws and give me
Yep.
grace, but do not know how to do that for somebody else. And I
Mm-hmm.
cannot tell you how many times I've swallowed my words and I've said, like, you know what? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I need to accept him where he is.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You know, and I think it's hard because we want that microwave. We want the
Mm-hmm.
whole, like, you know, I have
Yeah.
found a lot of relationships start, it's not love, it's infatuation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now that I'm growing with my husband, I'm like, I am more in love with him today than I was the first year of us being together, because love grows. Love
Yeah.
is a decision. Like, I choose to love you through your crap and you choose to
Mm-hmm.
love me through mine.
Yeah.
And when I see you and your faults, I'm not going to pick at them. I'm going to help pick you up in the same way you do me.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's so
And
hard to do. It's easy to say, hard to do.
yeah. Well, and that's when you look back at like people who've been married 50, 60 years, that's the difference from then and now. That and there wasn't a like very quick shopping mall available where you could just be like, oh, this isn't
Swipe
working. Let
left.
me press this button. This is the one now. And it's
Right.
like, so you could get an exact same version as the last one. You know, they might have the beard or they might have the blonde hair or they might have whatever, but they have a different insides. And so you're like, oh, this is easier. This is better. But
Yeah.
most people, they find that the grass isn't greener on the other side, you know,
Yeah.
and that what they had in the first place was, it was a good choice.
Yeah.
So,
It's crazy because you don't know, like, looking back, like you look at, like you said, like my list now looks different than it did then. And even as a
yep.
married, my standards and expectations
Yeah.
now look different than they did when we first were together. I've had to learn to adjust my standards and expectations to his strengths and weaknesses.
Yes.
And
Yep.
that means giving up some things that I think are essential to my relationship. I
Yeah.
gotta
For
choose
sure.
which hill I gotta die on. Like,
Yeah.
no, this hill I'm
That the
dying on
choosing
today.
your
I'm not.
battles. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's no matter like marriage or friendship or whatever. It's like you have to love people where they're at and you
Mhm.
need to choose your battles because there's some things just aren't worthy of it. And that's where it's like determining is this worth it? And that's going
Mhm.
back to that like pre-counseling or those
Yes.
conversations you're having in your head is like, or the emotional intelligence aspect is like, is this worth it? Is
Yeah.
this the hill I want to die on? Like, no, I don't think so. Not today. And also checking yourself of like, where are you at? Are you tired?
Mhm.
Are you worn? Like, what is your current
Disposition.
disposition? I
Yeah.
can't talk tonight. It's been a long day, but yes, because sometimes we start to say something. It's the same with parenting, right? Or like, and they're like, shut
Yep.
up, be quiet. We're not having this because this isn't the moment for this conversation.
Right.
And seeing if it's worth it for tomorrow, right? Is
Yeah.
because it's
Correct.
like not everything has to be a today conversation. Maybe you need to
Yes.
take a breath, maybe
Yes.
count to 10, go pray,
Yeah.
go walk around the block, and then reconvene and
Yes.
have kinder words, a better plan.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to save a marriage or a friendship is because it's like we're so like as you were mentioning earlier, so instant. And
Yeah.
everybody expects everything to happen like boom. Like I said this, I saw you read it. Why didn't you like that was a conversation I
Yes.
was having with my
Maybe
mom
I was
earlier.
busy. Maybe I was
She's like,
eating dinner.
she's like, well, she's like, I saw that they read my message, but they haven't got back to me. And I'm like, well, I was like, I hate it when people expect an immediate reply because it's just sometimes, as you said, somebody's eating dinner or maybe you're in the middle of working. Maybe I had the option to read the message, but I couldn't compose a
Right.
response proper back to you, especially if it's something that I can't just say okay or thumbs up.
Yep.
And so we have to kind of slow down our emotions and our responses if we want to have successful relationships.
Yes, absolutely. And I like how you mentioned like, oh, go take a walk, go take a run. You know,
Mm-hmm.
people don't realize like, okay, did you have any physical symptoms or experiences like after you got your divorce that came out like from stress?
Well, I lost 1,000,000 pounds, like in the midst.
Yeah.
So when he left, I lost about 25 pounds. I'm not a big person. So by the
Mhm.
time that he was gone, and I was breastfeeding, so I
Yeah.
was 25 pounds less. I went to work and they're like, "You have no butt. Where did your boobs go?" And I was just this stick figure. And it was just because it's like it was a combination of trying to feed somebody else, trying to take care of two kids, and then just the level of stress
Yeah.
and the sadness. It's like I
Mhm.
was dealing with customers all day. So in between customers, I'm sitting there like I had the best customer service numbers that I've had, like probably my whole Geico career. But
Mhm.
I would talk to customers, write an estimate, go in my office, cry,
Yep.
cry, cry,
Yep.
come out, we're
I'm
ready,
okay.
and
Everything's
do
good.
that over and over again. And
Yeah.
so that's an emotional roller coaster
Yes.
of trying to keep yourself together, especially because I mean, like I had just moved to Texas. I didn't have any friends here at all.
Mhm.
And the way that our relationship had worked, I didn't have very many friends left,
Mhm.
because that's the greatness of the narcissist behavior, is that they will find something wrong with every single person that you have around, and so you end up on an island. So by the time that he had left, I was sitting on an island all by myself. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I had a couple people that would still talk to me, but for the most part, I'm like, okay, I have no husband. I'm on an island and I'm a tiny little thing. So that was why like fitness was super important, is like started doing workouts and started running again. And that was a stress reliever, is I could put
Yeah.
two kids in a stroller and I could run, and I would just run until I wasn't mad anymore. And then I'd go home.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that was a win for me. It was like,
Yeah.
just keep running. I did a Tough Mudder that year. That was like the best PT test that I ever did, was because I'm running with 80 pounds worth of kids in a stroller. And I had to take it down 3 flights of stairs. So that was
Yeah.
like a whole
But people
workout.
just see you, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's crazy is that, like, you know, I would see pictures of you, how you showed me, like, when you went, like, did your bodybuilding and all this stuff. And
Yeah.
what's crazy is nobody would look at those pictures and think she's going through stress, she's
Mm-hmm.
battling something difficult, right? Because people see that woman running with her two kids. Wow, she's motivated. No, I have to do this because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need it. Like, you know,
Yep.
nobody sees that
Yep.
part, right? And
Yep.
even, man, like, even if he was a narcissist,
Mm-hmm.
you're still grieving the fact that you lost someone that you cared about, regardless.
Yes. Well,
Regardless.
yeah, and that was 15 whatever years ago, so many years that nobody talked about those things. Like no one talked about red flags, no one talked about what empathy looked like, what
Hmm.
narcissist, that just wasn't a thing. And so it's
Hmm.
like, these are, whether you are, I'm not trying to say he is or he isn't, but that was the behaviors. And if you look through, you're like, okay, that's this, and the way that it works.
Yeah.
But that was not something, as a young married person, that I even knew what that looked like, or like knew what
Hmm.
the warning signs are.
Yeah.
And so the plus is like, if you learn from it, you won't choose that again. That wouldn't
Yeah.
be the same path that you're going to choose, because you're like, oh, I'm starting to see that these are behaviors, or this is like a controlling thing. And so like, let me step back. And that
Yeah.
was, I think 5 or 6 years ago, I almost got remarried again. And
Hmm.
then I recognized that, not healthy plan, right?
Hmm.
It's like, if we're having a lot of arguments and we haven't even gotten close to like, okay, we're talking about getting engaged and we're arguing all the time, it's probably not the one.
Yeah.
Now, could it have
Yeah.
worked? Probably it could have. It was like, as soon as I broke up with this person, 5 months later, he got married to somebody else. So
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
I did prep him really well, and he did thank me for that. So
Hmm. You're welcome.
yeah, like I helped this person lose weight, get a job, buy a house, and then somebody else had him, which was perfect for me because he wasn't
Mhm.
for me. Like when I look back, I'm like, well, I'll run into him and her every once in a while. And I'm like, thank you. Not for me. But it was a learning process because it could have been that I did marry him and I could have repeated the process potentially.
Yeah, so
So
what has your dating journey been like since?
it,
Like what led you to open up and like what are you
yeah.
learning now?
Well, currently I haven't been dating at all because it's just been a really wild season. It's like I got my master's of divinity and that was like I had went to chaplain school. This is, I think it's been 5 years of like straight school, right? So I did my MBA, then I did the bodybuilding show and bodybuilding show time, like I was dating and stuff. But when it came to the master's of divinity, I really had to like take a step back. I've
Mhm.
basically taken a break on dating. I went on a couple dates, but for the most part, like not actively seeking. Figure that if God's going to give me a husband, that person's going to show up somewhere. Like I'm at a lot of events. I pray over a lot of things. I'm volunteering for a lot of things. And that would be somewhere where God would, or even at a Starbucks or whatever. But I'm not on a dating site, especially because I've had so many fake profiles
Yeah.
recently. And so all of fraud, it's like I spend so much time telling people that we are not engaged and that you would know that you were marrying me because I've
Wow.
probably had like 200 fake profiles at this point, and
Wow.
some of them are on dating sites. So I just feel
Mm.
like for my current life situation and the brand that I have, it's not a proper place for me.
Yeah.
And if God wants me to have a husband, that person will arrive. I'm very comfortable in being single and I'm totally not closed off on getting married, but
Yeah.
I think that it's all in God's timing. So
Yeah. Absolutely. So what did you learn from your journey of divorce? If you can like have people take something away from that, what did is the key takeaway for you?
I would say key takeaway is that that's not the end of your story.
Mhm.
You will be restored. It will take work, but there's a better version of you, and to have enjoyed the memories that you did have with that person. You know,
Yeah.
because it's like if I hadn't went through that, I wouldn't have these two beautiful kids. I
Mhm.
wouldn't be where I'm at. He's part of the reason, like I do serve as a military chaplain
Mhm.
because I saw like the need for the mental health and the help in the military because of things that he went through during that time. And so I
Mhm.
think that each part of your life, whether it's like challenging, it's devastating, there's still blessings in the storm. And
Mhm.
so that is the key takeaway. That and it's only one person. God's made so many different people on this earth that I'm sure that there's somebody else out there. So it's not a deal breaker. It's not the end. And you've been forgiven. That's the biggest thing is if you've
Mhm.
asked God for forgiveness in that, you've been forgiven. It's not something you need to carry around. It's not something that you need to drag behind you or be embarrassed about or feel damaged about. It is something that you can recover from, you can heal from, and you can love yourself in it. You know, you can be the
Mhm.
best version of yourself, even uh, with a divorce or whatever it is that you're going through. It's like all these things shape your character, but they don't have to
Mhm.
be who you are. They're just a thing that happened. So,
Yes, yes. You took the words right out of my mouth because that was something that I definitely like letting people know is just like this doesn't have to be your whole story. It doesn't
hmm
have to be your identity. It can be
yeah.
a part of your story, a part
hmm
of your journey. And like you said, it's what you do with it. And yes, divorce can be painful. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes
Yeah.
it has literally saved people's lives from very destructive people, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sometimes it's a cause for celebration for others. And while we put that stigma of like this is such a bad thing that's happening to you, it may be the best thing for somebody that they've
hmm
experienced because they are catapulted into, you know what, I'm gonna discover who I am,
Yeah.
you know,
For sure.
and that is a big part of the healing journey is what can I learn from this? How can
hmm
I grow? How can I heal? And like you said, how can I help others? And I think that's
Yeah.
one thing we forget is that your story can literally help impact somebody else. as they're walking through their storm.
Yep. Yeah. And God will continue to allow you to be in people's lives in order to impact them in a positive way. If that's what you choose, I think that it's like he'll give you the opportunity, but you get to choose if that's what you want to do with it or not. Or the other option is you can just stay miserable. You know, it's like I have plenty of, I meet people and they're like, oh, I got divorced like 20 years ago. So like nothing ever is going to be good again. And that's a choice. We all get choices, right? So it's all what you do with it. And if you're going to choose to be a rebuilder, create a different destiny for yourself, or if you want to just sit in it.
I agree wholeheartedly. Well,
Yeah.
Amanda, I really enjoyed having this talk with you and all of your insights and all of our goofy little side stories.
Yeah, it was good to catch up with you for sure. I'm super proud of you. I'm glad that you're headed in this direction, and it's been fun to watch you grow. So
thank you. Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for being open with our audience. If you like this episode, follow us for more mental health education and humor. Don't just learn about mental health, apply it by playing the game of your life. Create your free account for exclusive access to communities and a wealth of resources.